Every once in a while on this channel, I share an experience that I have and a reaction to that experience. And it's always this, hey, weren't you just in the presence of God? And it's this disconnect for me that has existed since I was a very young believer of witnessing someone having a supernatural event, like communing or being in the presence of, or being touched by, healed by, moved by, whatever you want to call it, the Spirit of God, the creator of everything, the great I am. And then minutes later can exhibit such human, lowly, sinful behavior. And as a Christian, it's not that I was ever shocked by man's ability to sin, but to see the sin happen so quickly, as if there's this spiritual half-life, I think is an excellent term to help us think about this concept that you are standing in front of, before, kneeling before your God, so full of glory that no man could see his face and live. You claim to have whatever experience you have just claimed to have, whether it is just an intense worship experience where you say that the Spirit of God was upon this place, like even that, which is rather common on Sundays across America, at least, even that should be the most unbelievably transcendent moment available to you as a human. And yet you can be yelling idiot at the guy for parking incorrectly and causing you to be a hair late as you leave the church parking lot. I saw that so often for so many years. And it's never the kind of thing that in and of itself is going to disprove Christianity or in and of itself should even cause a deconstruction process, but it was a part of it for me. And of course it should have been, because we were told that Christians would look different in the world. We were told that Christians would have access to parts of the spiritual realm that your non-believer simply could not have. And so between the expectations of believing the Bible and believing the things that God and Jesus say will happen for the believer and what they will have access to in his power, and then not just the fallenness of man, but the contrast of that immediate in the presence. Now we're out of the presence and we're just back. There's no lasting effect. Again, how long is the spiritual half-life of an encounter with God? So I offer to you the cliche story that so many of us have experienced and or heard about, but let's sit with it for a second because it is kind of the basis here. You have a church service, one that you wanted to commit to. You woke up, it was you who made sure that your family was out the door on time. We're going to be dressed in our Sunday best and prompt and ready. You prepared the money that was going to be your offering that you would put in the plate that day. And if you don't want to make this about you, then say your neighbor or your dad or whoever. But it's happening with millions of people every Sunday, so I don't think that this is an exaggeration. But you walk in, you're friendly, you're kind, you're greeting everybody. You're holding the door open. You're scooting your things over to allow more people to scooch in your pew next to you. Your vocabulary has even probably changed a little bit. You're using terms like brother and sister a lot more than you did the last 6 days of the week. You're following up on prayer requests and asking how so-and-so, if they're feeling better, that you've been thinking about them and praying for them. And you settle into your seat and put your Bible on your lap. It might be the only time all week that it's even been near you. Maybe you had to find it in the car from where you put it last Sunday when you left church for this performative little moment. But this is true even for the most sincere of believers. The point I don't want to make here is that, hey, look, Christians are super hypocritical, because the Christian's going to say, yeah, we're super hypocritical. It's a sin. That's why we need Jesus. Sure. My point here is, why is this perfection of God that is rubbing off on you like fairy dust not lasting when you walk out the doors of your church? Do you know what kind of power is in your God when he blessed a prophet and that prophet died, when the bones of that prophet accidentally touched another dead person, it rose them from the dead. The snot rags of the Apostle Paul could heal people. Was it Peter's shadow that was said to do the same? Like, just of men that were truly close to this God, but still in the physical realm. Look at what the power just accidentally did. And now with direct access after the resurrection, the ascension of Christ, you have this same spirit living inside you that somehow activates on a Sunday during a worship service in a way that you can only explain as the Spirit of God moving you, speaking to you, knocking you over in some cases, healing you in others. That is an extreme claim, an extreme idea that should have extreme evidence and results. And yet again, too many times we see the exact opposite. But back to the story. They put their Bible in their lap. They listen. They give more attention to this than they've given to anything. The nodding, the hands, the shouting of amens, or maybe different behavior depending on your denomination. But either way, it is a behavior that is at the highest, the most attention, the most respect, the most reverence. And then again, whether it is a baptism or a call for an offering, an altar call, a missionary sharing their message, an extended bout of unprompted worship that took over the room, a message that spoke right to your heart as the Holy Spirit got you on fire. Something happens, and for many people, they would go as far as to say, it's something supernatural. Some claim they feel it all the time, some just on certain Sundays or in certain prayer groups, and some maybe once a lifetime. But people do claim that these moments are something more than just the psychology of your mind, that it truly is the hand, the voice, the touch, the care of God himself upon the individual. It's 11:35 on Sunday, and God's presence is overwhelming. It's unmistakable. But at 12:08, the hostess says your table's actually going to be another 20 minutes. And all of a sudden, we figured out what the half-life of your spiritual encounter was. And pick your poison for the example. Is it the mother that you looked up to that had tears streaming down her eyes moments ago in worship with her hand up singing, "I surrender all," over and over and over, who said God was moving and they couldn't believe how powerful worship was today? And then because a restaurant is busy and the food is taking just a little bit longer to cook, and their youngest knocked over his drink, and now the server forgot the ranch, and that's just too much. That's where the line gets drawn. That's where the facade falls. The dirty looks, the nasty names, making sure everyone knows that you're not going to leave a very good tip, and then snapping at your kids. That's what the presence of God upon your life looks like, results in. And so, yes, I know I've turned it into a bit of a funny line in many of my episodes, but my initial reaction, even as a believer witnessing this kind of thing happen on a fairly regular basis, was, wait, weren't you just in the presence of God? And shouldn't that, how couldn't that mean something? And I'm not even going to pour the gasoline on that actually New Testament covenant wise, this God is always with us, right? Like the clear disconnect of Christians walking around as new creations with a spirit dwelling inside them compared to secular society and seeing no difference whatsoever, which we've done that episode. I'm talking about the best possible moment a Christian could easily exude Christianity would be after one of these supernatural moments. And I don't think it's expecting too much. I've seen people do a drug for the first time and have a totally new experience that we understand from a human perspective that is just how the brain is firing under this particular influence. And yet it can change their entire life. And there's other factors there, of course, just like the claim when Christians say, oh, I was, completely at rock bottom and I prayed to Jesus and now my life is different. There's a whole lot of other things going on there. I recognize that. I'm just saying that even if it just works as a catalyst to being more open or having the kind of experience where you just can't quite go back to normal reality right away. Why is there better seen effects of that after someone has a little bit of weed than when someone is conversing with God himself? These people really believe that he is speaking to them, either upon their heart or audibly, like a real voice. They're hearing God's voice. They're hearing his will for them, a direct fortune or prophecy or healing or whatever it is that they're getting on their life from their creator doesn't quite hit the graph in the same way that smoking a little bit of something does. The lasting empathy difference, recorded and observed difference of people that do psilocybin one time compared to the average Christian being in the presence of God and then going out to eat. Like, I know that it's a subjective example. I know that there are Christians that feel really high after church and are a little bit more easygoing than they are the following Monday. Maybe their spiritual half-life lasts longer. I don't know if I'm using half-life in the right term. Like, I understand the principle at large, but I don't know if I'm saying it correctly in terms of like where the verb is for it. Is that what it is? Is the half-life lowering? Is it expanding? But you understand what I'm saying. Maybe it is different for different people based off how intense the experience is. And all of that seems like something you could measure psychologically. But when you're talking about the Spirit of God being upon these people, maybe it's just me. Am I expecting too much from this God, from what an actual encounter with this God would look like? Look in the Bible. These weren't happenstance encounters. We're knocking the socks off of Moses here. Most people are terrified and falling down to the ground. They have one experience with a vision of Jesus, like Paul on the road to Damascus, or I should say Saul on the road to Damascus, and it's impactful enough for him to get a new name and take a new path, a complete change. But your post-Sunday service and pre-Sunday service attitudes look very similar, except for this little peak of holiness on Sunday. And some people make it look more real because they make it to Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday before that glory fades. Maybe you can start excusing that. But again, to me, so much over decades, seeing it be an immediate thing after, and not just a Sunday service. I'm talking about any time a believer claimed to, I had a dream last night. God revealed this to me. Someone sharing a testimony at a get-together at a church potluck, a small group break-off that has this powerful moment, and then seeing how they collect their kids at the end of the night. Like, it was just too clear to me that there was a major disconnect and that either all the Christians around me had the lowest of expectations about what actually being in the presence of God would be, or they were just fine with how quickly that kind of a thing could unimpact you or wear off. Which brings us to this amazing term. I didn't make it up and I didn't save it and I looked for it. I couldn't find it. I searched by the search terms that searching, by the way, in like comment history is horrendous. But I brought up this example about, weren't you just in the presence of God, as I so often do? And someone grabbed that timestamp and then just said, the banality of rapture. I love that. Not as in rapture, as in like revelation, as in of rapture, the term, the intense joy or exposure to the greatness, the glory, the presence of something so much different, so much better, love and peace itself. Now, for those of you who understand the basis of the reference, I am not making some subtle comparison that all Christians are Nazis. The term, the banality of evil, comes from Hannah Arendt about her reflections on Eichmann. And her whole point there is that the evil that's done under that regime didn't look demonic and monstrous. It's taking orders. It's doing your job. So no, I'm not trying to make it a comparison to the groups at all. The banality of evil is the reduction of something horrifying down to something ordinary. Then the banality of rapture. Rapture almost being a kind of opposite to evil. Rapture being something infinitely consequential. To be so in the same way reduced to the ordinary, I think is an apt comparison just in the term. So that was a long way of saying, hey, I like that term and stand by it despite how you might try to use it against me. The banality of rapture. Forget that your God said to be perfect like he is, to go and sin no more in his examples. Forget that you are supposed to be a new creation and that you are supposed to be known as followers of Christ based off your level of obedience and thus love to him, and that there is no discernible example of any of that. Forget all of that. So my argument today is just a plea to your last cop-out. Don't you think, wouldn't you expect a little bit, an effect, to bear some resemblance to the initial cause, when the initial cause is the greatest initial cause of anything that could ever be, that supposedly should mean more to you than anything could ever mean? Or has it gotten boring for you? I remember when there's a joke in one of the new Jurassic Parks that the reason they're doing all of the hybrid make bigger, crazier, scarier dinosaurs is because supposedly the general public got really disinterested really fast in dinosaur zoos. And I remember thinking about no, people still go to normal zoos all the time. Really lame little zoos will still be constantly packed because it's interesting. It's always novel. A dinosaur would always be unbelievably novel of an experience. There might be some, again, waning half-life in terms of how many times you go to see the dinosaurs before it doesn't excite you to the exact same degree. But is that what happens with God? Is God just a really interesting thing that eventually you went to church too many Sundays in a row and that whole thing of, the creator of the universe being in the room with you, having an experience with you, communicating something directly to you got old? I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I knew better when I was 5. I just didn't have the word or the terms or the arguments or the understanding of the psychology behind it. And because there has been nothing greater, because there can't be, because this God doesn't actually exist, Christians have had to settle for what they call a supernatural experience, and it doesn't stick around because it is just psychology. We have settled for a God that has no discernible difference from a good concert, a meaningful conversation, a book that you relate to. But it's clear to me, beyond clear to me, that in the only way we could observe this invisible hiding God from us is by the very believers who claim to be having an effect upon themselves directly by him, because of him, and yet it falls away and wanes off in the same way, if not faster, than many other experiences that a human can have. Would it be fair to say it should at least be the best experience, or be tied for the best experience? Be in the top 5 experiences, last half as long as the other top experience, again, like an exposure to psilocybin or something. I don't know. Could you pick one standard of what you might expect the actual residual presence of God to do in someone's life, and then be willing to call a spade when that does not happen? Or you'll do the opposite. You'll tell me, no, this is the expected outcome. This is the result. Yeah, when the Spirit of God moves upon a church of 3,000, it should make sense that a vast majority of those people are going to be sinning within the hour. That checks out, maybe off experience, but I don't think off honest expectation if we really held this God to the standards that we claim about him. That's the argument I'm trying to make here. And I know that this whole episode is a little more anecdotal. I am not pulling out all the psychological studies about the lasting effects of group dynamics in a high reward system environment. Like, we could go down that. I've done enough that I think I can mention it casually here. Feel free to show me where I'm wrong about how intense these experiences can be, but that they're still very clearly just human experiences. I just want to be able to point to what should clearly be the proportional psychological residue, because I saw it. This is what I was going to say. There was so much anecdotal examples I was about to say that I was like, I want to give the caveat. But, I just saw it in my own family. I saw it in my own church. I saw it anywhere that I was with believers. And I would see the opposite too. Like, I would see my mom when she would get some time with her mom, which wasn't very often, especially without her dad, she would come out of that experience different. She was truly with a presence that was so good and calming for her that it actually possessed psychologically, like still like in the realm. I'm not just saying love finds a way. I'm saying it makes sense that had an actual physical effect on her nervous system that brought down her heart rate and slowed her down, made her more empathetic. Like we can understand why that happens. And I just remember seeing examples like that, positive examples, not just with my family, with so many other things in life where I was like, man, that's like the kind of thing I would expect God to do, except of course more, bigger, consistently, and longer. And it was just so inconsistent. Even when you would have the one that seemed like, oh man, yeah, they were the one shaking on the ground at the end of service, and they still seemed a little like, whoa, at the Red Lobster afterwards. I'm not saying there were none that weren't like, oh man, something looks like it's happening there. But why not with everyone? Why so inconsistent? God, which is supposed to have the most powerful presence that is enough just living inside you to make you an actual new creation, has the weakest effect of any other observable, natural, psychologically understood effect. This can't be the God you want to worship. John's vision of Christ in Revelation leaves him falling at his feet as though dead. Earlier, I made the joke about Moses knocking his socks off in reference to just being in the presence of God to the physical point where he removed his shoes out of honor and reverence. But what about when he has his bigger encounter with God? He comes down the mountain and his face is actually physically changed and radiant and glowing, and the Israelites are afraid. When the prophets really encountered God, like Isaiah, he screams, "Woe to me, I am ruined." And so many more examples. And again, unfortunately, all I can do is hear the believers' excuses that, well, obviously Brandon, John's vision and Revelation, or the Old Testament prophets are going to have pretty different experiences than your standard Sunday service. Really? Is that what you claim? Don't you claim that God is filling this place? That revival is upon the nation? That God showed up, that you were in the throne room? That the Spirit fell? That you felt the presence of the Almighty God? That Jesus met you there? Like, you don't get to claim the things you claim and then so quickly back down to the mundane when it doesn't match up. The fact of the matter is that the Bible, when it speaks both Old and New Testament about the presence of God being upon a place, that place is changed. That person is different. Stuff is going down. And now that Jesus has literally opened the floodgates of the connection with the presence of God to the point where that's constantly inside you, and God as an omnipresent being is always all around you, but then you believe you can have even higher, more intimate moments than that, and that still can't get you to the same thing as a little puff, a first kiss, a third kiss, a 50th kiss. I'd argue that real, genuine, human, physical connection has a longer lasting empathy effect if we're just going to measure one tangible than your song and dance and worship service. Are they all liars? Are they all false Christians unlike yourself? Are all these pastors making it up when they say from the pulpit that the Spirit is filling this place? Or if this is all expected behavior, then what should we expect? How long do you think it took before Moses' face went back to normal? And why isn't this consistent? Like, I know that you as a believer can make excuses for every one of these. You can have something to say back. I'm wondering if you really believe it, if you really think that it makes sense, if it adds up, if it's really a satisfactory answer, or do you feel like you just keep having to kind of make a few too many excuses for this all-powerful, all-perfect God all the time? Because that's where these pieces of evidence kept adding up for me. It was too much. It was too many things that went in the wrong direction. It was too many things that didn't work together. It was too many inconsistencies between how we speak about this God, what we say he's doing, and then how we apparently don't really think or expect that, because here in his word we read about what it actually look like when he was actually speaking and acting, and the results that it had. And it's night and day. So you believe in the world's most inconsistent, impossible to count on or replicate God ever, but continue to claim that he's immutable, that he's perfect, that he is bound to his promises. No, he's not. The proof is right here. It's just a question of how honest you're going to be and how many times you're going to lower your expectations for this God. I know where my tipping point was. Then you become fully honest with everything else, and it just melts in front of you, and you wonder how you ever believed it. And it's not because there's this huge deception from the enemy that's washing your brain away. It's the opposite. Yes, it's a cleansing of all of the bias, of all of the filters, of all of the excuses and apologetics that were layered in front of you that didn't allow you to see, and you got rid of them, and you're just seeing it for what it is. And it looks awfully ordinary, awfully familiar when you compare it with other religions, now that you're willing to be open-minded about those and those claims and how they're really no different and rely on the same kind of excuses. And this is what it is to deconstruct. But I see where people get stuck and how it can be so additionally harmful and burdensome and unnecessary. And so that's the whole goal of this channel. We're trying to untangle for you in different ways, from different angles, about different stories or different parts of the Christian claim to religion or biblical experience, and say, wait a second, does this make sense? Is this what we expect? So that was just to hopefully explain why I think that this video is worthwhile. It might just be one of those missing pieces, one of the parts of the chain that needs to be addressed for you. If so, I hope this video helped. If not, I hope you thought it was interesting, or at least challenging. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you Tuesday with a new video. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast and Chris, Greysteel, Jimmy, Joe, Kitboga, Lori, Matthew, and Perry; my Humanist heroes, Chris, James, Jarrod, and Kristi; my Atheist advocates, Aquitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jugs, Julie, Melissa, Paul, Reggae, Sparky, and Thomas; as well as all of my secular scholar patrons and new Mindshifter members. Thank you so much for your support. It means more than you can ever know.